And we've done the segment. Football Bob, Gary Comer, joins us. Football Bob on the website, also on Twitter as well, joins us to kind of look back at the Baylor Spring game as well. And Gary, we could only, again, it is just a spring game, and you don't always have quite a bit to look at. But one of the things that stood out to me, and I get it's a spring game, was there was some big play potential from some names that we have not seen or really heard about, or at least we knew they were on the roster. Was that something that's kind of rare? Because in recent years, we really didn't see that with Baylor.
Well, in the skill positions, there's been quite a bit of turnover for Baylor, and I think some of the young men that have been sitting behind those guys that are going to the NFL this year really did a good job. Monterey Baldwin, I thought, just jumped on the video. He was terrific. His speed just ran by people. Gavin Holmes was very, very solid, and we were glad to see Gavin come back. Javon Gibson and Trent Bonner, Josh Cameron, all those receivers that I had real big questions about, those guys were great. And then, of course, you talk about Craig Williams, the squirrel, and he was terrific. He was a lot of fun to watch, and we knew Tay-Mac Williams was going to be good, but he really showed that he's going to be a solid back for Baylor this year.
I want to go back to Josh Cameron a second. He's a walk-on redshirt freshman. Certainly looks the part. Gary, absolutely. With the way he's built, he made a really good. It wasn't much of a yardage catch, but a really good catch going away from his body on the sideline down in the red zone. What are your overall expectations for him?
Well, I really like his size, and he's got great hands, because the catch that you're talking about, Gary Bohannon threw it perfectly. There was an underneath man in the throwing lane, and so he had to widen the throw. Cameron makes a great adjustment to the ball and catches it with his hands before he goes out of bounds. In fact, he was able to turn upfield. That's a very athletic play for a young man, especially, he had a little bit of jitters the very first time he got the ball thrown to him, and the ball went right through his basket, missed the ball, but he comes right back and makes that catch, and I was very impressed.
Gary, what were your thoughts on the quarterbacks? Obviously, a competition going on all spring long, and this is the final showing, so to speak. Gary Bohannon, Blake Shapen, the main contenders, but we got to see some other guys as well. So what were sort of your overall thoughts?
Well, I thought the number 3 and number 4 quarterbacks looked really good. I think Drones and Rogers are going to be very good. And I am a Gary Bohannon guy just because he brings versatility to the offense instead of just being where he drop back passer. I think, there's a lot more versatility. But there's no denying the fact that in this scrimmage, on this one day, that Blake Shapen looked better than Gary did. I mean, Gary's good. He is terrific. But Blake Shapen showed the kind of 17 for 17 type performance that we saw against, Oklahoma State. It was very impressive what he did.
So what separates, there are two different styles, Gary and then Shapen. In your opinion, has Shapen done enough? And I know you're not at practice, but for what you've seen, what will it take if you were on that staff to make a decision about who your starter is, or do you feel like that's still way down the road, maybe August, September?
Well, I think that Coach Aranda really wants to make a decision, and I think they're having those meetings with players this week, and I think that probably there is going to be a decision here. You have to weigh a lot of different things. Gary Bohannon could be a great dual threat quarterback, and that would really balance the run game. Last year, that was probably more important than it is this year. Last year, the offensive line still was an unknown quantity, and so you really wanted a little bit of diversity in your run game to help them. This year, those guys can block a wide zone play and make it go against one of the best defensive fronts in the nation in the Baylor Bears. So you might not need that diversity quite as much, but I still think it's going to help against, the very toughest teams they have to play. On the other hand, I can't say that it's not a good idea to go with Shapen just because the young man is a pass completer, and he is so much better than Gary is about getting the ball out on time. Now, when he's in there, Coach Grimes basically calls mostly drop back passes, and it's mostly inside the hash mark where he's throwing. And so I don't know if that might not be eventually something that people can figure out how to defend. And so Shapen needs to diversify his ability. He's got to throw to the wide routes, and he's got to be more consistent on the deep ball. He threw a couple of good deep balls Saturday, but he has not shown that he is consistent on the deep ball over his career so far.
Gary, it looked to me like this team is, as it should be, very much built on the fronts, that they have depth on both fronts and that they can do a lot of things there. Given that on the offense, not that it doesn't matter, but do you feel like they'd be at least okay either way, that they could run the offense they had last year and be fine, but that still puts more on the defense in an ever-changing Big 12 that's opening back up to more and more air raid concepts?
Yeah, I think that they can be very consistent with this offense. I think that Coach Grimes is going to bring in a few new ideas that he wasn't able to get to last year. It's going to make the offense a little bit more diverse. I think that if Shapen is the quarterback, that it will look more like an air raid type thing. It'll be 3 and 4 wides and a tight end, and people are going to be running intermediate routes like they do in the air raid game. Now, if Gary's the quarterback, it's going to be a diversified run offense. In the best world, Paul, I really believe that going with Gary as the starter and running that running game with both the quarterback and the running back being both ball carriers, and then throwing the play action pass and throwing some drop back, and just keep running Gary until he either can't do it or he gets hurt. And then if he gets hurt, jump in there with Shapen and run that drop back pass and just keep on going. I think Baylor's in a great situation if both of those guys stay and nobody goes into the transfer portal. Baylor's in a great situation. No other team in the Big 12 has that quarterback situation like Baylor does right now.
Gary, obviously they're not going to throw out the full playbook in a spring game, but was there anything that you noticed that was all that different from last year defensively in terms of the players they're replacing, like a Petrie and Bernard? They don't have those guys anymore. They're going to have to do things a little bit differently. Was there anything noticeable on that front?
Well, the biggest thing that I noticed is that they were playing really base defense. They didn't do much stunning. They did almost no blitzing, and that defense was still very good. They held the line of scrimmage against a very good offensive line. Early on, there were a couple of plays where Tay-Make Williams got a little bit of a gash and made 6 or 8 yards, but they didn't give up the big play in the running game. The concern, I guess, would be the big plays that they gave up over the top. And, of course, some of the guys that gave those plays up probably won't be playing as much as some of the guys that are on the number one defense.
Gary, sometimes spring games can be just, they can be sluggish, not look good. Do you feel like this one overall was well played?
Yes, I really do. I think this was the best executed spring game that we've seen since Coach Briles left. throughout Rule and early on with Coach Aranda, some of the performance in the spring game has been a little bit ragged. Ones, twos, even threes on Saturday played pretty well. There were very few actual errors or mistakes in regards to not knowing what you're doing or not doing it correctly. Now, you got beat every once in a while when somebody ran a good stun or that they had the right play call when you were moving one way and they were running the other. There were some good plays there on both sides of the ball. But execution-wise, this was great execution.
Gary, when did you get a chance to lock in at all and watch Jackson Player?
Yes. Boy, he's impressive. I mean, Baylor has 3 quality nose guards. Apu and Player and Ogmanaya. I mean, those 3 guys are, it's going to be terrible to be a center that has to go up against those guys for a whole game. They're going to test those centers, no doubt about it, in the Big 12. Those guys can play. And I was very impressed. Jackson Player was playing base technique against a really good player, and he was holding his own. Jacob Gall is good. And Jackson did a lot of playing against him. And Jackson did great.
Gary, if you were looking at this roster the way it currently stands and you were looking to go to the transfer portal, we know they got Josh White coming in. Are there any positions that jump out to you that you think that they make sense for Baylor to pursue this offseason?
I'm a little bit shaky about the safety position. And even though I was very impressed with the receivers, I'm still thinking that it would be great if Baylor could go get, a guy like Tyquan Thornton. They're not all out there, and they usually don't move. It'd be difficult to get a guy like that, and probably can't get a guy like that. But if that was possible, I would say that those are the 2 things that I think that they might want to address in the transfer portal.
Okay, you mentioned players who have had injury issues and history, unfortunately, with Gavin Holmes and Squirrel. You saw what they could do when they're out there, but as we've discussed on this show, now they got to go do it, and they got to be available every week in and week out. Yeah, there's going to be some bumps and bruises. How frustrating can it be when you have 2 like that appear to be able to make plays, but you just always hold your breath, it seems like, every time they take a hit?
Right, it's just tough. I mean, can you imagine being the player and just knowing that? I mean, that's got to be so hard for them. And, of course, it's hard for the coaches as far as, we love this young man and we think he can do great things for us. But how long can we count on him being there? The nature of overcoming injury is that, for the most part, once you've done the rehab and once you've broken it in a little bit, you're good to go. And it doesn't mean that it's going to happen again. Now, in Gavin Holmes' case and Squirrel's case, it has happened again. So you wonder if there's some structural problem there that's causing that. But on the other end, you just got to go play. And so, if it happens, it happens, but play hard until it happens. And don't worry about it.
Hey, Gary, thank you. I almost said, hey, Bob. Football Bob on Sic'Em365.com and also on Twitter. Great to hear from you. How you doing? Everything good with your health?
Yes, it looks as though that my cardiologist is looking to do a couple of other things, and so that's out in the future. But really, health-wise, I feel really good.
Thank you very much. That's great news. Thank you. Gary Comer, longtime football coach, football analyst on Sic'Em365.com, Sic'Em365 Radio. When we come back,